have to talk in English because my Portuguese doesn't allow me to do it. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizer for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today about a topic which is still quite thorny in our contemporary society, and which resonates with our modern debate on sexual rights of women. And as the title reveals, today's talk is about female genital mutilation, as the World Health Organization does term it, and as the modern society, which are still performing it, do understand it as a practice. But it's also about the ancient perception and the significance of female genital mutilation in ancient medicine and society. I need to... Yeah. So in order to narrow the topic down to one main point, I'd like to pose you a question, which indeed I posed to myself, which is female genital mutilation, in the end, all about controlling women's sexuality? So it's really all about the fright of women's sexual pleasure and the power to control it. So this paper is in no way an attempt to present a solution. I don't have one. Or to approach the problem or the issue as a moral problem. What I argue is that it's worth presenting the issue of female genital mutilation in an historical perspective, because it's a valuable, though challenging mirror to inquire female identity in the society and to appreciate the role of women as brides and wife and sexual beings. It's not an or here, it's an and. So I'll attempt to provide a list of evidence, both for modern and ancient society, and try to stick to the facts to give you an historical overview. So fact one, according to the UNICEF, more than 125 million girls and women alive today have been cut in 29 countries in Africa and Middle East, where female genital mutilation is performed as a lawful practice. Fact two, in 1997, WHO, UNICEF, and UNFPA condemned internationally all practices of female genital mutilation for non-medical reasons as a violation of human rights of women. So, fact three, I'm reading here from an extract from an article published in the New York Times in 1996. In countries where genital mutilation is practices, about 2 million youngsters a year can accept the knife or the razor or the glass shot to cut their clitoris or remove it altogether with cut dart or thorns. And often the operation is prettified as a circumcision, as could the name make it prettier or better. The African specialist Nahi Tubia put it plain. So in a man, it would range from amputation of most of the penis, its root of soft tissue, and part of the scrotal skin. So far, we have been talking about female genital mutilation as one practice, but there are three types of cutting according to degrees of mutilation. And the first type, also known as sunnah, which in Arabic means blessing be upon him, and this him is the Prophet Muhammad, is the mildest type. And it is prescribed by Islam since it's deemed to be recommended by the Prophet. It consists of only removing the clitoris, like the foreskins in male, so the prepuce. That's why it's considered to be analogous to male circumcision. And extended genitalia are usually left intact. The second type is the intermediate one, and it was invented and introduced by the British government in 1946 after the legal forbidding of the third pharaonic type, which is the most radical one. And this type here, the intermediate one, consists of removal of the clitoris and part or all of the labia minora. The third type is the oldest one, and also the most radical one. And it is known as pharaonic circumcision because it's dated back to the pharaonic period. And it's also known as the infibulation since it consists of the removal of part of all the labia minora, along with the sewing together of the labia majora. So thereby covering the urethra and the vaginal orifice, and it leaves a small hole for urine and menstrual blood. So fact 5. What are the alleged reason, the modern reason for that? So according to modern ortho anthropologists and doctors, the reasons are the following: tradition, religious demands, hygienic practices, better marriage prospect, greater pleasure for the husband, preservation of virginity, to increase fertility, to prevent vaginal infection, and so to improve general female health, and to curb, so to limit sexual drive and pleasure. In 1982, bodies, so an anthropologist reporting a fieldwork in a village in Sudan, wrote that for these women, though, circumcision in this society made girls marriageable and made girls capable of using their greatest potential, which is considered in this society their fertility. So fertility is as appropriate morally value. And in this sense, female genital mutilation, in particular infibulation, so the third type, the most radical one, is considered to socialize female fertility and is used as a means to emphasize feminine fertility by de-emphasizing female sexuality, which is at odds with the female fertility and non-morally appropriate value. So we have fertility against sexual pleasure. So health problems, short-term problems resulting in tetanus, septicemia, bleeding, difficulty in passing urine and urine retention, cuts in the urethra, bladder, vaginal walls, and anus. And long-term problems include chronic uterine infection, massive scars that can hinder walking for life, fistula formation, hugely increased agony and endanger during childbirth and early death, difficulties in sexual penetration, pain during intercourse, and menstrual complication, which bring us to fact 7. So the infibulation, because due to urinary and pelvic infection and difficulties in passing menstrual blood, and especially, so in particular, due to difficulties in sexual penetration, it's not uncommon that in modern society, women who were previously circumcised performed the infibulation. And this is usually carried out by midwives at home, because the couple, and in particular the husband, shames herself, because it means that he was incapable to penetrate his wife. Whereas the practice of reinfibulation after each delivery is usually performed for the following reason: desire to please the husband, following the advice of family's women, husband request, habit, tradition, ashamed not to have it. And furthermore, a woman may wish to be reinfibulated after the death of a husband, or if divorced, in order to regain social virginity. So to put it bluntly, virginity in this society is a social value, is a social category. So virgins are made and not born. In antiquity, we find 2 types of female genital mutilation: a ritual clitoridectomy, so a cutting of the clitoris, and a selective medical clitoridectomy, which is prescribed by the doctor due to an overly enlarged clitoris, which was medicalized as a pathological condition associated with unrestrained, so abnormal sexual desire. The first medical anamnesis and diagnosis of hypersexual disorders to be cured with clitoridectomy goes back to a Roman gynecologist, Sorenus. Unfortunately, of the original text, only the title is extant in a 15th century manuscript. And luckily, we can reconstruct the contents of the chapter on the basis of 3 later Latin texts and 1 later Arabic text. So evidence 1, I hope you can see it. Museo, circulated in the 6th century a gynecological handbook under the name of Sorenus, translated Sorenus' chapter on clitoridectomy into the Latin de immoderata landica, so concerning an immoderate and excessively large clitoris. And here it comes. So a large clitoris is a symptom of turpitude. In fact, these women strive to have their own flesh stimulated, just like men, and to obtain sexual intercourse. Now, you will perform the surgical operation on her in the following way. Placing her lying on her back with the feet closed, one should hold in place in a small forceps and cut it back, so the clitoris with a scalpel. Evidence 2. Callus Aurelianus in the 5th century translated Sorenus as follows. And an abnormal size is present in certain clitorises and brings women into disorder by the deformity of the private part. And those women affected by the sexual arousal typical of men take on a similar desire, so a similar desire of man. And if it comes to that, the excess part is to be held in place in a small forceps and cut it back with a scalpel. Evidence 3. Paulus Egideta in the 7th century wrote, an immense clitoris occurs in some women, becoming a shameful ugliness, such that have erection of this part like man, again, and eagerly desire sexual intercourse. In Paul's text, the clitoridectomy comes after the description of surgeries for hermaphroditism, which has made some scholars think that female genital mutilation might be thought in the past for intersexed people. And in this sense, it's worth here mentioning that also in modern times, a theory of bisexuality has been adduced as one potential reason for female genital mutilation, referring to the idea that the male part of a woman's soul resides in the clitoris. Likewise, the female part of a male soul resides in the foreskin. So that's why the idea of circumcision. And the story example, the ancient myth of Thyresia, which Professor Rodriguez just mentioned at the beginning of this session. So Thyresia, who born as a boy, lived then as a woman. So evidence 4, also thought to derive from Sorenus, is an account by an 11th century Arabic physician, Al-Zarawi. The first evidence in Arabic we have, who commented, the clitoris may grow in size above the order of nature, so that it gets a horrible, deformed appearance. And in some women, it becomes erect, like the male organ, and attain to coitus. So the message conveyed by this author is quite straightforward. So an overly enlarged clitoris is, first of all, morally and aesthetically ugly, deformed, and shameful. And secondly, it is medicalized as a pathology because it's thought to cause an unrestrained and abnormal sexual appetite, and sexual appetite leads to hypersexual disorder. And why is that? Because a penis-like clitoris poses the problem in the past that women, like men, are potentially capable to penetrate. And that was a massive problem in a society, as the Greek-Roman society was, where sexual penetration, so where sexuality was tantamount to sexual penetration, from the very point of view of the male active penetrator, of course. Which means that women, as well as young slaves or boys, are thought to perform or to undergo the passive role. So women and boys have to be penetrated. If a woman thinks that he can penetrate, that's a problem. So evidence 5. The upside-down picture of the normal appropriated sexual disorder is not just thought by doctors, but is also depicted in poems. So Marshall, in one of his poems, described a woman who is behaving like a man because she says she buggers boys and she bangs. So she has sexual relationship with 11 girls each day, with the erection of a husband. Here's the point. 6, evidence 6, this typically male sexual arousal in a woman is cited by Juvenal to be a peculiar feature of the wife of the Emperor Claudius. So the rumors reported that the wife of the Emperor Claudius used to wander in downtown at night and sell her body as a prostitute because was moved to unrestrained sexual desire. 7, the fact that anatomically, but women have got something like a clitoris, and through the stimulation of this part, a woman can be sexually aroused, is well illustrated by another doctor, Greek this time, so it's Rufus of Ephesus, who in his anatomical description indulged in a plethora of terms to define clitoris, and he even refers to a verb, to clitorize. And he explained to clitorize as to touch in a sensual, in a licentious way. An analogous definition to be found in the Suda. So here, nonetheless, Paulus of Naucratis, who is a 2nd century grammarian, refers to clitorize just to stroke the clitoris. So namely, probably with no apparent sensual or sexual meaning. Evidence 9 and 10. So the idea of a huge clitoris was not only known by ancient doctors, and we find this evidence in a poem where the clitoris of Fulvia is described as immodica, as huge in terms of aggressive. And in a Latin inscription where we read that Eulpia has a clitoris, evidence 10, which is big and loose. In the 6th century, another Christian doctor, Aetius of Amida, approaches the issue of clitoridectomy. Aetius deals with the problem from another perspective, though. They're about differentiating the practice he described as a ritual clitoridectomy against the type of selective medical clitoridectomy we have been seeing in the medical writing stemming from Soranus. So Aetius says, the nympha, so the clitoris, in some women attains such a size that it may eventually constitute a deformity and lead to a feeling of shame. And further, it is greatly irritated by constant contact with the clothing and stimulates venery and coitus. On that account, it appeared feasible to the Egyptian to amputate the clitoris before it became too large, especially before the marriageable virgin were to be assigned. So along with the Egyptian origin of the practice as a ritual or as a rite of passage before marriage, Aetius very interestingly draws attention to the physical mechanism that promote clitoral stimulation, so the rubbing against the clothing. So Aetius' passage seemed to corroborate Strabon's account, a Greek geographer who, after his visit in Egypt around 25 BC, reported, "This is one of the customs pursued by the Egyptian, to raise every child that is born and to circumcise the males and excise the female." That the practice was performed in Egypt in preparation for marriage is documented by a papyrus as well, which is now at the British Museum, which reports a girl from Memphis went to a temple of Serapis for gathering alms for her dowry and for her circumcision. And the custom is also reported by Philo-Judaeus and Ambrose. The only archaeological evidence we have is a test found in a sarcophagus concerning a magical spell for a woman who wishes to, for a man, sorry, who wishes to know how not to die. And the spell reads that he should recite every day this spell after his